Welcome everyone, I'm Spiro with Newsbud.com. Today we're going to be talking with one of the newest additions to the Newsbud team and covering his exclusive article published at Newsbud titled NATO's Currency War Against Turkey, Comparative Resistance and Solutions. Joining me now is Mr. Pye Ian. Now, Pye Ian is an independent economic and geopolitical researcher as well as a strategic planning and business development advisor. His articles and analysis on international affairs, economic trends, and cultural topics have been published in various mainstream and alternative press sources. He has an undergraduate's degree in economics and political science from the University of California and a master's degree in finance from Cambridge University. Mr. Pye Ian, welcome to the Newsbud team.
Hello, Spiro, and hello, Sibel. I'm glad to be here and honored to be speaking with both of you.
Well, that's right. Also joining us is the founder and editor of Newsbud, Sibel Edmonds. Now, Sibel, you have been strategically and methodically interviewing and recruiting the best and brightest here at Newsbud, and now here we are welcoming the newest addition, Mr. Pye Ian.
Absolutely. Well, I'm honored really to be here talking about our newest addition to our Newsbud team. But as you know, we have been growing very rapidly. And one of the major objectives I had for Newsbud, and this was before even Newsbud was publicly born, was to cover all the important pertinent areas when it comes to geopolitical developments. And we are seeing that, we are witnessing that on a daily basis. We, of course, have had Christoph Jurman with us for several years. He covers Central Asia and Caucasus. We have one of the top experts when it comes to Russia and the Balkans and everything that goes with those areas with Professor Filip Kovacevic, Russian newspaper monitor. We brought on board Peter Lee, whom I consider one of the top experts when it comes to China. As with Professor Kovacevic, Peter Lee has lived in China for a long, long time. He speaks the language. He's fluent in Mandarin, and he has been a well-respected analyst, journalist when it comes to China, North Korea, Pakistan, India, that whole region over there. Kurt Nemo provides us with great weekly shows that combines both geopolitical developments, especially those involving the Middle East, but also some of the domestic issues and developments that we are witnessing every single day. We just brought on board John W. Whitehead, and he is a constitutional attorney. He's considered one of the top 5 constitutional attorneys in this country. I consider him as #1 because he is more than just an attorney. He has been a great, accomplished author. His lecture series are phenomenal. We're going to get to that. To make the long story short, I have had all these great ingredients that we have put together, but all along I've been feeling this major shortcoming, the lack of having in-house expertise when it comes to economical developments and finances, and especially since we know that those tie directly with every single day, every single geopolitical developments we are writing about and we are talking about. So to leave out and not by those people who truly have the expertise, that area, I kept feeling something missing. And I started looking into Mr. Ian's writing, analysis. I have to say, many of them are way over my head. I have a master's degree in public policy, but I'm one of those people who always tries to zip up when the topic boils down to some of the major points that have to do with either economical consequences or implications, because I don't have that expertise, and I don't think any of us at Newsbud has that expertise. So reading these papers, speaking with Pye and communicating with him, I'm just like, this is exactly what we have been looking for. So we just published this fantastic article It's only 4 or 5 pages. But for people who are interested in this very, very important topic, we also provided the link to the entire PDF full analysis, which is about 68 pages. And there, Mr. Ian provides us with all the needed data, sources, all the graphs, statistics, everything there. So we have both versions available to our people. And our Kickstarter, next Kickstarter is starting in the next couple of weeks. And right now we are discussing with Mr. Ian the possibility, the opportunities, such as having him on weekly basis, just like all other shows that we have, scheduled shows, and bring to our viewers all the highlights, the important developments within the financial, economical sectors, and how those tie in with all the other political developments that we are covering, whether it's on Russia or if it's on China or the U.S. domestic policies. And with that, I would love to turn this whole conversation to you, Pye. Your resume is so impressive. And one of the things that got my attention right away was the fact that you also are fluent in Farsi. And Farsi is one of my native languages, one of the languages I speak. So I wanted to find out, and I'm sure our viewers would like to find out, how did you acquire Farsi as one of the languages that you speak?
Thank you, Sibel, for that great introduction. Farsi is my native tongue, my mother tongue, if you will. I speak it, I should be honest. I don't read or write it. It's because I left Iran at a fairly young age, many decades ago, prior to the Iranian quote-unquote revolution. Nonetheless, it does provide nuance for discerning between domestic and Western press versus foreign press. And generally, just being from abroad while being an American citizen provides the sense of appreciation for different views and to be globally minded. You don't need to necessarily, I mean, it helps to be able to read foreign languages, but there's so much in English already online for the genuinely curious, for the discerning mind, for those that don't just chuck their brain at the door and watch mainstream corporate press to try and discern what's happening in the world or in the United States. And to be honest, in somewhat a sense of revolt against my formal educational pedagogical training, jumping through so many hoops, sweating so many sleepless nights to get the grade, to get the degree, to get the diploma, and all the while seeing that the social sciences that I'm so passionate about exist in two worlds. There's the theoretical world, which isn't just presented in textbooks and in academia, but more so through, as I said, the mainstream corporate press and its government tetherings. And then there is the kind of reality-based world of, call it what you will, the deep state or finance, kind of in dark pool finance or off-the-books finance, and how the two worlds tend to intermix together. In order to deepen myself as well as to share with others that there are layers to knowledge and that they should really, in a sense of revolt, ditch every other type of distraction and learn for its own sake, for the sake of themselves as well as the world we live in. So that's me in a larger nutshell than I wanted.
Well, thank you for that. As I always do with every single team member during interview sessions, during the initial discussion of exploring the possibilities of bringing on board new people who will become members of this. I truly call it my dream team. It's been, I don't want to jinx it, but it's been fabulous working with so many wonderful people that not only I appreciate their work, but also who they are as persons, their characters, the way they carry themselves, the way they are independent. And I always put out this question to every one of our members, and I did that with you. And I'm always blunt. I'd say, so tell me, Are you connected to any of these foundations, think tanks, let's say whether they are Soros sourced or they are Koch brothers or Rockefeller Foundation, etc., which I was so glad to hear you said, no, I have had zero ties with any such foundations. The other thing I always ask bluntly, we do not like ideologues, especially when it comes to this two-party system here in the United States. And when people are kind of staunch followers that first, before anything, they identify themselves as either a Democrat or a Republican or an XYZ, that I believe, especially when it comes to analysis and reporting and explaining to the people, what is happening, always get in the way, because it taints the objectivity, and it gives an angle, or some people say it, an agenda. And again, I was glad to find out that you haven't succumbed to the two-party system in an ideologue way, which is extremely important for us. And with that, I'm just going to jump to your first article that we published. It was the moment I saw the title, when you sent me the original PDF, the 68 pages, I was like, this is fantastic. We have been covering the coming referendum in Turkey. We had a great roundtable with Professor William Engdahl and Professor Philip Kovacevic, and the referendum is less than a week away. It's only 4 or 5 days away. And with everything that we've been seeing related to Turkey, this was incredible timing that you sent me this great analysis. So I want you to tell us a little bit about this article, especially the important points, because I know I don't have expertise when it comes to econ, finance, etc. But one of the things I began to figure out, as a layman who is looking from the outside and reading all these articles, editorials, analysis out there, that there is more than one way to economically target a country, destroy a country. One overt way is countries go and declare sanction, and they say, okay, we are putting these sanctions, and we're going to go and get all our other allies in Europe, etc. Thou shalt not engage in any commerce with, let's say, Iran, or if it's Syria, and that's overt. But as you know, and you're expert in that, there are other ways. There are more subtler ways. I would say even a bit covert ways of targeting target nations, the ones who we want to target, their economy, and actually bankrupt them. One way, of course, we have seen them for people who have been paying attention. We know what George Soros does with his power. He can go and bankrupt a country overnight. And we have had examples of it. But that's not only with these supposed outside powerful forces, but when you look at both the governments together with the mainstream media of other countries, let's say in this case Western countries, they can actually achieve the same thing, and that is targeting, weakening, or even destroying a target nation's economy based on falsehood. Again, for that, they do need the media. They need the mainstream media. They need BBC. They need CNN. They need Washington Post, New York Times. And in this case, with the article you wrote, which is an amazing piece, and anybody who has not read it, I encourage you to go and read it, and have the courage to click on that PDF link and take a look at all this great data presented so organizedly to you. And you're talking about NATO, the Western countries, especially led by the United States, targeting Turkey's currency economy. Tell us a little bit about this article, why it's important, and some of the macro points there illustrating how this targeting is taking place or has been taking place.
Well, Turkey's been leaning eastward toward China, Russia, Iran, Central Asia, an independent forum for strategic and economic reasons and for deal making for a few years now. From 2003 through 2013, it is Turkey's economic resurgence is described as the golden age. But as the Turkish economy strengthened, it is an autonomous, sovereign, independent nation decided to go where the money is, go where the deals are, go where the momentum is, and that happens to be increasingly eastward. Hence the need, the perceived need, in an increasing, in order to rein in basically an increasingly obstinate, nationalistic, and unpredictable President Erdogan and his AKP party before NATO's energy and territorial apple cart is disrupted any further. That's really kind of the core mandate, along with unleashing or helping along the path of domestic terror attacks and a coup attempt last July. The West is inflicting economic propaganda against Ankara in order to weaken foreign confidence in its growing economy and thus constrict Western finance, at the least, from participating in any of it. The West doesn't want to share their quote-unquote client state with rising Eastern powers, and many saw the same patterns with Iran and many other nations, whether 40 years ago, 60 or 80 years ago, or whatnot. The U.S. dollar certainly is a currency. It's the global reserve currency, but because it is, in many ways, it is also a weapon. And in this case, it's serving as a benchmark against a tactical takedown attempt against the Turkish lira in steps normally taken in lieu of sanctions. You had mentioned sanctions because Turkey is a NATO member and technically an ally of Western nations. You can't outright place sanctions on it for quote-unquote misbehaving. So one step short of that is to drop these hints that things aren't as rosy as necessarily the seemingly increasingly autocratic leadership is claiming, and hence they go this route. So, American credit rating agencies, the three core ones, Moody's, Fitch, and S&P, these are the same ones that 9 years ago lost so much credibility by giving passes to institutions carrying toxic collateralized debt obligations, which were backed by worthless mortgages, which then led to the global financial crisis. Nonetheless, these credit agencies claim to impartially rate Turkey's currency and wider fiscal standing today as mostly negative. These credit rating agencies, as I mentioned, Moody's, S&P, and Fitch, are married to mainstream corporate transatlantic press sources in order to, quote, double up, if you will, the messaging. Those opinions are then parroted naturally by the mainstream financial corporate press, be it in London, be it in Washington, be it in Brussels and Frankfurt, wherever. And so to the public or even to those working within institutions of finance, they're expected to toe the line. Turkey has nicely responded, however, in a defensive fashion and in a concerted fashion against this messaging, and not just against the coup or the terrorist attacks, but against the attempts to sabotage its economic growth pace. My paper reviews steps over how Turkey has done so, why Turkey's overall economy does not warrant a plummeting currency, and draws analogies to other nations as similar or related, targeting pains, if you will, in the financial sphere, i.e. Russia, Iran, Venezuela, Zimbabwe, the Philippines, imminently Egypt, and even India in certain circumstances with regard to trying to do away with cash in that nation of 1 billion plus citizens. So this impending Turkish constitutional referendum, Sibel, which you referenced earlier, if it garners a yes vote, it would then catalyze the Sovereign Wealth Fund and other governmental innovations for both economic growth and political and fiscal defense during this growth. And this defense that I mentioned wouldn't just be against any sense of currency wars or other types of attacks, but possibly even more so a defense against the rising risks of an impending second leg of the 2008 financial crisis.
I want to put it in one real life example, okay, which basically shows the confusion or the ignorance of people like myself, because last week I came across this article. It was published by Al Monitor a week ago, and the title was "Why Turkey's Growth Data Has Economists Scratching Their Heads." Okay, so as a layman reading this article, first of all, I right away detected the timing issue. Here is the referendum coming, and here is this article with this title alone saying the data coming from the Turkish government, the economic data, has all the Western experts scratching their heads. So I started reading this article. And this, in summary, what it says is the fourth quarter growth for 2016 for Turkey is shown as 3.5%, 3.5%. And the forecast by these rating agencies that we just mentioned, the Western agencies, was that no, it was going to actually continue to contract and get smaller. Therefore, from there, the article is going, of course, there's some bashing of President Erdogan, etc. Then basically it tells you that the article that IMF and US, UK credit agencies find the data provided by Turkey, the economic data, unreliable. Meaning, even though we were proven wrong based on all the report they put out, this is the Turkish government, we were not actually wrong. Turkey is putting out information and data that is not reliable. Basically, they're saying they're making it up. They're playing with the number. So when I read this, not being an economist, not being an expert in finances, my instincts based on the political stuff, the knowledge that I have, and all the political development outside economical and financial areas, I know that this carries agenda, the timing is highly suspect, and the powers that are disputing this data, this information, happen to be IMF, okay, International Monetary Fund, and US and UK credit agencies. On the other hand, not having the expertise, I won't be able to counter this and say, well, you're wrong, because I'm looking and analyzing this economic data put forth by Turkey, and everything is backed and sourced, and there is no misinformation or unreliable data put out by Turkey. Why can't I do that? Because I am not an expert. I haven't spent hundreds of hours going through all the data and ingredients in that economic report for that quarter to be able to make an informed decision that this article not only is wrong, here is how I would counter it. You know, it's very easy for us to buy into that. This is what the credit agencies are saying. This is what Wall Street Journal and Al Monitor is saying. So Turkey is faking its data. Now, this is one of the reasons we need you, Pye, and that is, in layman terms, without getting into the more academic, in-depth analysis, for people like myself, if you were to say, when you look at this article, what is wrong with this article? If there is anything wrong, they may be correct. Again, I don't have the expertise to say that. What would you say about this article? Going through the data, looking at the Turkish econ report for that quarter, and say, here is why this article is accurate or it's false.
Economics and finance, certainly in the kind of Keynesian and neo-Keynesian dominated Western world and its pedagogy, are almost purposefully meant to confuse. And those who are supposed experts, you have to look back at fairly recent history, not centuries back or decades back, just over the past 15 years of, again, prior to 2008, which in many ways was kind of the 9/11 of global finance in many ways. Prior to 2008, plenty of mainstream economists and people within finance, and certainly these three credit rating agencies, said not one word about any sense of sustaining risk. You had to go to what they call the heterodox economists. You had to go to behavioral finance specialists. You had to go to historians. It's like economics as a discipline and as a profession is almost purposefully, tactically divorced from history, which is, that's by design in order to have people get lost in the mathematical minutia versus look back on just, a simple thing like history. Henry Kissinger, while he was in government, he was the spearheading force behind the 1973 petrodollar arrangement. Was he an economist? Was he a mathematician? Did he have a PhD in math or in physics before going into not the Treasury Department, but the State Department, and then eventually both the State Department and the National Security Council? No, he was a historian. He still swears by being a historian. So my appeal is for your viewers, for yourselves, to not get intimidated, A, or distracted or confused, B, by either the words economics or by finance. So with regard to this article, Al Monitor, first of all, is an interesting news source, quote unquote. It's a typically Washington consensus leaning news source. And I put news in quotes for a reason, which in this day of thousands of choices for English language readers online, seemingly leans more Eastern in its editorial bent in order to try and win general trust before then issuing Western biased copy like this. So this particular article that you've referenced starts with tripe like this, quote, "For the majority of Turkish economists, excluding those who curry favor with the government of Turkey, the credibility of the newly reported statistical data is questionable," end quote. And I emphasize the word majority because that's the writers of this article. They managed to use that word without blinking an eye. So my thought is great. So these writers have apparently surveyed access personally to all Turkish economists to make that statement, or only the Western banking tethered kind who happen to want Erdogan out of power. And the other thought with regard to that sentence alone is, why knee-jerkedly defer credibility to anti-Turkish government economists in the first place? Possibly because you're assigned an agenda by your editors and by the private Western interests which fund them. So you have to kind of take the language that is utilized within this Al Monitor piece with more than just a grain of salt. Their biased tone continues, quote, "True to style, Erdogan gloated at credit rating agencies, which he has frequently slammed for unfairly cutting Turkey's grades." So all these assumptions just with regard to word choice. My question is, has this always been Erdogan's quote-unquote style, even during the prior decade when he was the Atlanticist darling for achieving exemplary growth in the emerging markets category? Or only since the West has tried to put Turkey in its place by various means for leaning eastward, including coup, assisting in false flag terrorism, and currency wars via statistical propaganda? And you have to think critically is what I'm appealing to. And you have to think with sobriety rather than, oh, I'm not an economist, these folks must be right. These article writers claim that, quote, "the most glaring inconsistency," end quote, between Turkey's new gross domestic product data sets and other economic indicators involves those between growth and unemployment, claiming that 11% average unemployment in Turkey could not possibly allow for rising growth in fourth quarter 2016 and or first quarter 2017. And yet, and this will be a forthcoming article to you folks as well, the subject of which, real U.S. unemployment isn't the sub 5% that Washington officially reports, but is anywhere from 2 to 4 times that figure per shadow stats, per heterodox economists, and per the means the U.S. used to use itself before the mid-1990s. So U.S. GDP growth is similarly listed as positive despite the economic reality of very actually high unemployment within the United States. And yet, where's the Al Monitor coverage on that glaring reality, which so many overseas are more than privy to? No worries. Again, it'll be my subject of my future article as far as the data sets here not being necessarily that accurate. So this Al Monitor piece cites economists essentially urging Turkish adherence to the United Nations, to the IMF, European Union, and to their data standards versus internal Turkish institutions. And the same entities essentially intimately connected to credit agencies on assignment to target and lower investor confidence in Turkey's economy based on politicized mandates issued ultimately by the same entities for organizing the July coup attempt. So there's an interrelationship between these macro institutions like the UN and IMF, European Union, the general Washington consensus, is, if you will, the credit agencies, these press sources, as well as, I don't want to say compromised, but questionable economic authorities that know who butters their bread. One hand triggers violence with regard to Turkey, violence and instability, while the other hand cites that instability in order to, quote, paint the tape, if you will. The final sentence of this Al Monitor piece is loaded and fairly revealing. It reads, quote, "How much the IMF and credit rating agencies will trust the new data from Ankara is a curious topic to watch in the coming days, end quote. That's because both the IMF and credit rating agencies, again, ultimately report to the same banking powers and their trillionaire owners, as far as my learned opinion is concerned. It should also generally be noted, and I'll note it, that Al Monitor bills itself as, quote, the pulse of the Middle East, end quote, while citing the Washington Post, The Economist, CNN, Al Jazeera, Wall Street Journal, New York Times as firmly endorsing it. That should give pause to anyone familiar with those sources and their transatlantic establishment owners. The Brookings Institution, the Council on Foreign Relations, these very definitively Washington consensus establishment entities or think tanks openly endorse Al Monitor on its page. It is based in Washington, D.C. It has people from the RAND Corporation, from Schlumberger, from UNESCO, the generally neoconservative leaning Washington Times newspaper, and again, other establishment entities on its board of directors. So, this isn't, definitive in the sense that Al Monitor is 100% anti-Turkey or, anti this nation or anti this region in all contexts. It's just that these things need to be weighed for those that look at international news and international affairs with some sobriety.
Well, we truly appreciate your points because the gist of what you said in general is what we have been advocating. One is make sure you engage in critical thinking, okay, and rely upon and have confidence on your critical thinking. And then the other thing is also has to do with common sense, which a lot of people, especially within the academic environments, they urge people on the opposite. They're like, lose common sense. Don't look at the history, okay? That's irrelevant. And give up on your common sense and basically parrot, here are the formulas, here is what we are giving you, and just spew that one out. And those are the people, of course, we see, at NPR, with this great authority, people who talk about all the mumbo jumbo gibberish stuff, and they say, well, I'm an expert. But I really appreciate you pointing to the most important raw facts about it. Say, look at the source, okay? Why we sometimes put Al Monitor editorial pieces is interesting, because for me, it's the indication of what the enemy or the side we are opposing is engaged in. The saying goes, you need to keep your enemy closer than your friends, basically. And that is when I go every day and I check out Al Monitor, whether it's on Syria, whether it's on Turkey, by seeing in and reading in between the lines that they have in there on editorial pieces and knowing who supports Al Monitor, I get a better view of what is their weak points for the enemy, and how they are going about it, and what is their strategy. And the strategy, as you said, just the choice of words or adjectives. As you said, President Erdogan used to be back then a prime minister. He was the darling of the West. They turned him to be the angel. They made him to be on the cover of Time magazine. This is the face of modern Islam. And Turkish economy, it couldn't get any better. It was flourishing with the direct Arab investments from Saudi Arabia, etc. All those things overnight, starting after 2011, 2012, took this 180-degree turn. And looking at that, knowing the history, as you said, look at the timing of the coming referendum, then reading this is what we the people need to be doing in order to understand, instead of stigmatizing ourselves, saying, well, we are not economic experts, like I was saying, and therefore we don't have any authority to judge what is being fed to us, whether it's through Al Monitor or Wall Street Journal. On a positive note, I'm hoping that it's positive. I'm not sure if it's going to be positive. I've been reading these articles from Turkey that they are starting, just like RT, Russia Today, their own TV network in English, so they can counter. Because whenever we are seeing articles, whether it's Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, etc., even the so-called alternative media, where are they coming from? those institutions, Pye, that you just named, whether it's CFR, whether you're looking at Rand Corporation, you're looking at those institutions. So it's hard to counter because 99% of the news, or not more than 99%, in Turkey is in Turkish. So unless you have the expertise in both languages, you are only exposed, and this is most of the world, to the US version, the Western version of it, the ones that are being published through Al Monitor, etc., in English language. I think it's a good move. I don't know how good it's going to be. I know RT has been very successful for Russia. And of course, we have to also find the middle ground between the two, because as it is with any state-owned news agency, there is so much faith we can put. I mean, they are there to represent a singular point of view, generally speaking, especially if it has to do with their domestic policy, to balance that, what this side is saying, what they are giving, and then using the common sense, using history and knowledge, and say, where is the likely facts or truth in this particular on this particular points or on this particular issue. So it will be interesting to see how they proceed, Turkey, with this new English language international TV network, and how they're going to counter it, if they are going to be able to counter. Starting with this referendum, there's going to be tons that we're going to be seeing, both in Turkey but also elsewhere in the world. We are going through this really critical point, globally speaking. We would like to have you back, Pye, and have actually a good roundtable on some of these developments, especially after the referendum and what we're going to be seeing. Again, we are very pleased, excited, and honored to have you on board with us at Newsbud. And I know our viewers are going to appreciate your articles, your analysis, and your soon-to-come weekly show. And we will be reading more from you, and we will be hearing more on when the show will be kicking in.
Well, thank you both. Thank you, Sibel, and thank you, Spiro. And this was a wonderful opportunity to basically share what I became fairly obsessive over a month of writing, just as a knee-jerk response to seeing what the agencies were doing, because it was familiar to me because of what I had seen through historical readings, as well as just news observation against other nations. And but generally, with regard to your show, I think it's a great opportunity for presenting even-keeled, sober analysis and news for anybody within the English-speaking world.
Well, I'd like to thank Sibel Edmonds, the founder and editor of Newsbud, and also thank Mr. Pye Ian. We are very pleased and excited for Mr. Ian to join the Newsbud team. And in the next 2 weeks, Newsbud will be launching our Phase 3 Kickstarter campaign. And one of our goals with a successful campaign is to have Mr. Pye Ian do his own weekly show for Newsbud, covering economics and its direct correlation with geopolitics. And this will nicely round out the Newsbud team and our coverage. So Newsbud is 100% people funded. We depend on you for your support to keep this operation running. We have over a dozen team members here, so be sure to support this broadcast. Here at Newsbud, we want to give back to our supporters, so Newsbud is now offering weekly exclusive videos only available at newsbud.com for our community members. So to get full access to all of our content while supporting this broadcast, go to newsbud.com and sign up today. For just a small subscription fee, you can become a member of the Newsbud community and help keep this website running. Your subscription will provide you with full community access to exclusive content, including videos and articles from Newsbud's team of experts and analysts, as well as a members-only monthly newsletter from Newsbud's founder, Sibel Edmonds. Sign up today for full access at newsbud.com.